Alright, so lately with the Camaro, I have been getting extreme blow-by and smoke out the tailpipes. Whenever I'd even half throttle it, quarter throttle it, wouldn't matter. It would just pour smoke out the back end. Full throttle, it'd smoke so bad you couldn't even see the cars behind you. Burnt about a quart of oil every 130 miles. It was that bad, but the compression numbers still seemed fine. Did a leak down test, showed that it was mostly intake valves that were leaking and exhaust valves. But I ended up deciding to pull the heads off. So as you'll see in this video, we're going to go ahead and pull the heads off the car and take a look at them and see how bad they look. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pop these clips off the actual air box itself, unplug this connector, unplug the connector from the MAF, the IAC connector I think, and then for the TPMS sensor, or TPS, not TPMS. It's throttle position, not tire pressure monitor system. So then after that, we're going to need to do a Phillips head, unscrew this right here. That'll give us access to all the stuff. Then after that, we're going to take the coil packs off, which have 10mm screws. So we're going to take all those off, unplug the coils, the wires, and then we're going to unplug this, which has the thing broken off, so don't worry about that. We're going to unplug these, pop those out. Before you do any of this on a car, make sure the battery is disconnected. Mine's not right now, because I've done it 1,000 times, and I'll get to that in a second. But when you're doing this in your car, it's good practice to make sure the battery's off whenever you mess with electrical or go this deep into an engine. So underneath, before you want to do any of that stuff, make sure the car is cold. And I'm not sure if you guys can see, but there is, oh, it's back behind here, I think. There's a petcock for the radiator. So you need to drain all your coolant out before you do this. So there's a little screw down there you'll find. Just twist that screw, make sure the engine's cold when you do it, because you don't want any boiling hot water to come spraying out of there. So just unscrew that, make sure you got a bin under there to catch all the coolant. Once that's done, either there's still gonna be coolant in the block, but we're gonna get to that later, because there's actual plugs in the sides of the heads that you can unscrew and pull out of there to drain the rest of the coolant out of there. So we're going to unscrew that for now, let all the coolant drain out, and then we're gonna get to the coil packs, take the strut tower brace off, take the brake cylinder off, or the brake cylinder brace off, because that's covering the strut tower brace. After that, take throttle body off, like I said, coil packs, wires each side, then valve covers, then the intake, and then we'll get to the heads. Alright, so in that amount of time I got the, so you don't have to deal with this on yours. If your car is stock, you won't have the brace cylinder, you won't have the strut tower. Mine's aftermarket in that sense, so I have those two pieces you gotta take off, which is why the extra bolts there, and then the brake booster bolts you gotta take out for the master cylinder. to get the lines to move a little bit. But other than that, we got the intake off, that off. I have not drained the coolant yet because the car is still hot. We got the coil packs off, so next up we're probably gonna pull the plug wires out of the actual heads and then take the spark plugs out of all cylinders. Either that or valve covers, because it's still pretty hot out in that engine today. I don't really want to put my hand in there with blazing hot exhaust pipes. So actually we might just do valve covers first. Take all the PCV lining off the catch cans off the back of that hose, or the back of the valve cover, because the back of this valve cover, you got one hose right here on top of it you can pull off. And then if you can see one right there, you'll pull those two off. I'm sure you guys saw when I did the driver's side, there's the PCV line. This hose right here, that just pops into this little spot on the valve cover. So you just pull that out, should come out pretty easy. And then you have to remember, before we actually pull these off, like pull the intake off, you gotta take this cap off. This is a weird looking cap, but you gotta pull this off and release the pressure from the fuel lines. So your valve cover bolts are gonna be 8 millimeters on each side. There's there's 4 bolts each side, 8 bolts total, and just take those out and then pull the cover off itself. To do the intake manifold, we're going to do that before we do the spark plug. It's still pretty hot. So the intake manifold again is 8 millimeter, 2, 4. I'm not sure. It's probably on 6 or a little bit more than that. Bolts to take out. How you're going to do this? You're going to take all of them loose. There should be a bracket actually here for these lines, which is this right here that I never put back in. That you'll have to unscrew that from somewhere back in here. But when we get all these bolts loose, we're gonna leave the fuel rails on, not gonna mess with those. This has gotta come off, the throttle body's gotta come off. This bracket's gotta come off. And what we're gonna do is have all these bolts loose, and we're gonna try to tuck them up to the top if we can, and then lift it up and lift it up. Before you do that, you have an oil pressure sensor on the back of your intake, which, if you're an LS guy, you'll know that these things, on specifically these cars, will snap off the oil sending unit, which is about right where my fingers are at right here. If you can see that, down a little bit. And what happens is your brake booster hose goes to the back of the intake, and your oil pressure sending unit sits like this. And what will happen is when you pull the intake forward, this hose will come forward, smack your oil sending unit, and as you pull it, it'll just snap it right off the actual screw. So make sure before we do that, we're gonna lift this hose up, or just take it off of here, so you make sure it doesn't clip it. Just make sure it clears that back of there. And with all this stuff out of the way, you can easily go back there and feel for it and do that. Also, you can also take the sender off before you do the intake this way too. It's actually not hard to do. If you gotta do it that way, so you know for sure you're not gonna break it when you pull it out. I've broken them once by putting it back in and hitting it and snapping it off. So I might just take it out beforehand. And yes, you will need a special socket to get that sending unit out, but O'Reilly's and AutoZone, Napa, every place has them. In order to take this throttle cable off the actual throttle body itself, all you do is you flip this throttle back like that, and you see how it's sitting right here? If you can, pull the cable forward like this, and just slide it out like that. Let it go, and it comes right off. And just tuck this somewhere where it's not going to get damaged or broken at. the throttle body itself right here is 3 bolts. These 3 bolts are 10mm bolts. You have 1 up top and 2 on the bottom on each side. It's easiest to see the 10mm. All it needs like that. I don't think you need an extension. I don't remember exactly from last time. But once you take all those off, you have this coolant line connected. And since I haven't drained the coolant yet, I'm just going to leave that on there. I'm just going to take it off and move it to the side because it really won't make a huge difference. So I'm going to pull this PCV hose out of the actual intake right now off to my catch can, and then I'm going to try to pull my catch can off of there and pull it up and put it to the side and just lay it down because it's probably leaking some oil in there. And you can actually see on the throttle body, I had this thing perfectly cleaned less than 1,000 miles ago. There's no oil anywhere on it. Now you got it all in here. You can see it backing into there. You can see it coming through the actual one of the lines from the PCV, and you can actually see, I'm not sure if you guys can see, but there's the whole inside of the intake is just oily, all inside of it just caked in oil. It's probably half my, so we're getting a lot of oil consumption coming through the intake itself. And like I said, I think a lot of these, something in the valves themselves, the valve seals are replaced, weren't fixing the issue, seemed to only make it worse. So maybe they didn't seat right, but none of them actually backed themselves up. But they almost every single intake valve is leaking pretty badly. Exhaust valves, some of them I've noticed maybe leaking, not crazy obvious, but almost every single intake valve had a lot of pressure coming out of the manifold. So now we got this off. I forgot you do need to take your power steering pump off, which I really don't want to do, but I guess I have to. So you're gonna need a puller to pull this pulley off, 15 on this tensioner to pull it over to get the belt off. Then you got a few bolts behind this pulley. I think it's about 3 of them, 3 or 4. Undo those, this whole thing will come off. That way when it's time to actually take the heads off, we'll have this done already. But we're still gonna focus on the intake, and the throttle body's already off, and for now this is a good enough spot for it. So we're just gonna focus on taking the actual intake itself off and making sure we don't snap that goddamn thing in the back. Like I have done. I literally did it 2 weeks ago, last time I did an intake manifold gas for my dad's car. So before we take this off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the fuel pump relay, which, don't judge me, this thing's old as hell, so I got tape over it, which is this fuse right here. That wasn't even holding it. Just going to pull the fuse for the fuel pump and leave this somewhere else safe. I'll pick that up later. I'll take this cap off if I can get it to come off. I don't know what it's stuck on there with. I'll be right back. So again, make sure your engine is cooled off, and don't judge me. This is the closest thing I found that have the right diameter to fit in there and press it. But ignoring this, make sure you have your engine cooled off. You don't want any gas, because gas will come out of here just a little bit. You don't want to be a blazing hot engine, and the chance that it could cause a fire is really slim. But just to be safe, make sure the engine's cooled off enough so it's not going to just spray fuel all over a super hot engine bay. So just gonna go over there. You might want to wear gloves for this. It's gonna get all over your hands. Mine actually didn't spray really anything out. So just make sure you press that little Schrader pin in off the little valve in there. Make sure all the pressure's gone out of the lines. And we are gonna need to open this up. So I think this you just, I forgot how you. So what you actually do with these ones is you want to turn this thing. There's gonna be 2 sides to it. This one side, you don't need that side. You need the side that's all flat. Just gonna press that in, and the line should pull right out. Same thing for this side. You do not want this side. You want, where did that side even go? Oh shit, mine's broken. I gotta fix that. Good thing I caught that one. But anyways, this side, don't want that side. You want this side. This is what should be on this one, which is not. But you just want to make sure You get this one, press it in all the way, this side should pop out, and then it should slide off. Before you pull your intake off, you're going to want to pop these clips out on every single injector. Just a retainer clip. Kind of be careful because they are very easy to lose. Just pop them out, they look like that. They hook over, you just got to pop one out and pop the other out. And there are 8 of them. See, that one fell. I'm kind of getting scared that I'm gonna fucking pop one out and it's just gonna fucking fall into here and going down one of the holes. Although I don't think it's too big to fucking fall down into the actual engine. But just be careful whenever you do them. They don't take too long to do. But then like that, you fucking lose them. God damn it. So that one's fucking lost. I gotta look for that one. So yeah, like I said, just be very careful when you're popping these out. So now when you get all these rails, all the plugins disconnected, you have this one little rail connection here that you need to take off. What you need is an actual fuel rail disconnect tool like this. I lost all of mine, so I'm just going to use this one, and it will fit, but this is technically not the right size. But you just open it up, slide it over like that onto it, then you slide it like that, and it should push the prongs back to allow this thing to leave the actual rail. After that's done, you get all these plugs connected, or connector plugs, off the actual injectors themselves. All the bolts are out. This trans dipstick on this car is actually bolted in, surprisingly, but I'm gonna see if I can try to pull this thing up and get it out without having to unbolt this. I just tried to spend 30 minutes unbolting this and it was not wanting to work. So hopefully I can get this thing out without messing with this, but we're gonna go ahead and see right now. So you slip it on like that, press it in like that, and then fuel is gonna come out. So then you just pull it in, pull it out like that. And try to keep this thing up somewhere so it doesn't spill fuel everywhere. So when you have all of your intake bolts loose and you pull on it and it doesn't budge, leave it, because that means that there's a bolt tight somewhere, because these aren't, I've never had one of these where it's like seized onto the actual block and you gotta pry and pry to get it to pop off. In my experience, whenever that happens, it's because I'm missing 1 or 2 bolts, because like this bolt right here, I missed that one. They'll hide them in these little rails right here. But 1, 2, 3, 4, there's about 4 bolts per side, so make sure all 4 are accounted for, so you don't end up yanking on it and breaking an intake completely. Now we pull and see it fall right out, just like that.
I'm gonna pop this thing off that clip. And the back isn't wanting to move, which these things right here you don't need to undo. Those are just for the rail. They don't have nothing to do with the actual how the intake bolts up to the block. I think it's that transmission dipstick that's really fucking me up. Fuck. Alright, well I guess I gotta loosen this dipstick. I did not want to do that, but I guess I have to. So you do need to pull a dipstick to the side. In order to do that, there's a 14mm bolt back there. It's on the back. It's on the bottom side of the head that are bolted up. You'll feel if you go down there, but you need like the valve cover and all that stuff off to actually get access to loosening it. Easiest way I found was to get a wrench or a wrench socket and put it back there like this to the back of it and just slowly loosen it. Mine wasn't tight, luckily. It was kind of snug, so I was able to get it pretty easily. But once that's out of the way, you should be able to get this intake out, but we need to make sure that it doesn't clip the so I think an easier way is to try and pull it up like this. So we got it out decently, so let's make sure that it's not caught on anything. Okay, so the center unit's still on there, back there and all intact. So now be careful because this line will drop fuel out. You do need to undo this brake booster line. I just forgot about that. What is it caught on? So when you pull the intake off, you have your wave 1 connector. You got to disconnect back here. I'm not sure if this line is supposed to, yeah it is. So there's a line that goes into this. For mine, I'm not sure you guys can see, it's right here. It's a vacuum line that goes to your AC. There's your oil sending unit right there. That's what you usually snap off. Just be careful about it. Yeah, you got your plug right here. Alright, so what I did was I took the crossover tube that was on top of this valley cover off. There's 4 bolts that are all 10mm bolts. Take them off, and then the crossover tube, the coolant tube, comes off. Then you have 2, 4, 6, about 10mm bolts for the valley cover itself. You have a knock sensor harness on it. The harness goes back by those ones, and I'll show you. Right here's the cover. This is your plug-in you're looking for. So unplug it. Here's your bolts. These go over the actual mounts. That might be broken. These go over the knock sensors. How can you tell if your knock sensor is old? Well, you can look at one like that. It's got plastic bits broken off the actual clip. That's brand new, even though it was installed like 5 years ago. This one was never replaced, and that's all corroded and nasty. It might still be working, but it definitely is having, it looks like it's about time to be replaced anyways. So yeah, so So I ended up taking the exhaust manifolds off. You got 10mm bolts. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 of them. They should come off pretty easily. If you haven't done it before in your car, be careful because they could actually snap off and break. I haven't had that luxury, but other people have. And there should be enough room. You can get an extension and a socket back there and pry them back enough to actually get the heads off. Getting them back on, I'm not exactly too sure yet on that. But we got that cover off. We got these manifold gaskets, or the manifolds off. And now we need the power steering pump. Plugs on this side I did take out. Every single one is fouled up except for this cylinder right here. So we're gonna go ahead on the other side and pull the plugs out, get the headers off, and then I'm probably gonna actually disconnect this radiator hose so I can get more room to get the actual grabber for the pulley so this hose doesn't fight me every single bit of the way like it always does. And yeah, so the coolant's drained, everything else is done. We're just gonna get the headers on that side, the pump, and we should be good to go. Went ahead and pulled the heads out. You also have an oil dipstick on this side. That's a 15mm bolt. You just got to take out. It's super easy to do. And take the whole dipstick out and get all the plugs out. Which the plugs actually, if you have the coil packs out, the plugs are super easy to do. It takes like 10 minutes per side, if even that. What I did notice was, so we have massive oil consumption on the car, and these plugs I put in there have less than 500 miles on them with hard accelerations and all that stuff. And what I noticed was the driver's side, these are the fronts, these are the rears, driver's side, passenger. Driver's side are all pretty caked up. Passenger side is super clean on every single one. So theoretically, I'm thinking my issues are going to be in the heads on the driver's side. Because like I said, the compression numbers showed pretty good. They both sides are about the same compression numbers, but one side is absolutely dousing the plugs up, the other side's not. And there's no lean codes, it runs fine. I know it's not lean because it gets like 10 miles a gallon, but it's I'm assuming my issues lie in that head on those valves, but we're still going to do both at the same time. For this far, might as well. Alright, so I didn't get that side because I snapped off the lip for the power steering pulley. Gotta cut that thing tomorrow. So I decided to do this side. The exhaust manifolds, if they are welded, it's highly recommended that you cut them back by the collector just because it's a pain in the ass. I made it work just barely because it was covering the bottom bolts down here. What I did was I got a crowbar and went and pried against the collector to bring it down a bit, and then just laid it on some blocks, so I kept it there, and it brought it down just barely enough to get the bottom bolts out of the head. We now have the head fully unbolted, and I don't think there's anything on the back of the head. Yeah, there's nothing on the back of the head. Expecting a lot of coolant to pour out of this. Yeah, well too. I'll lay it here for now. Huh. Yeah. So that's one side done. You can see the gasket still on there. It's a are these Velcro gaskets? Oh no, maybe that's, I'm not sure, I can't really tell. That is, I'm not sure, but got one cylinder off. Tomorrow I'll get the second one off, and yeah. So I kind of slacked off on recording more for that video, but these are the heads that we got. This was the driver's side head, or passenger side, that actually had somewhat clean, the pretty clean spark plugs. You can see the valves look kind of whitish, look all right. Then we get to the passenger side, the driver's side, sorry. That one, every single cylinder is caked up pretty badly. And then once I pulled the cylinders off the driver's side, I started seeing scoring on the cylinder walls. It wasn't enough to really feel with your finger, but something was definitely going on in there. So I said, if there's enough scoring, it's got 250,000 miles on it. I'm this deep into it. As you can see that, laying in here. I'm sure you already know. I just figured why not just go through the rest of it and pull the whole thing out. So I went and bought a cherry picker and decided in a weekend to pull it out. And now it's at the shop, so waiting on it to get back.